Alright, this is going to be the circular saw safety video that we're going to do. We're going to show you what the circular saw, what it looks like, the different parts of the circular saw, how to use it safely, how to operate it, the different types of circular saws. So we're going to go over several things. Make sure you pay attention. The things that you're going to need, you're going to tape measure, pencil, speed square, we'll talk about, safety glasses. 90% of the time you're going to need a clamp of some sort, depending on if you're using table or saw bucks, and a battery for, these are two battery powered saws, so we got different batteries. We're going to talk about the saws first. These are DeWalt circular saws. You get whatever brand you want, obviously. This is a 6.5 inch circular saw. This is a 7.25 inch. A 7.25 inch is the most popular. That's what everybody's used for, I would say, decades. This one has, I believe it's 24 teeth on it. How many teeth the blade has depends. It will determine how smooth or rough your cut is. This one also, I believe, has 24 teeth on it. It has a fixed upper blade guard and a retractable lower blade guard. The retractable part moves out of the way so that you can obviously cut your wood. This is what I call your base plate. All right, your base plate has a little notch here. That is 0. That's for cutting a 0. The other side of that notch is for cutting at a 45. We'll show you. If you're now, you can angle, you can bevel your circular saw if you loosen this up, and you can bevel this, and you can put a bevel on something. You can put it right there is 45. 45 is probably one of the second most common angle that everybody cuts on, and that way I could use the right side of that notch, put that on my line, and cut if I want to do a bevel. We're going to straighten this back up. We're going to make a straight cut at 0, and we'll tighten that back down. This is your motor. Depth-wise, if you're going to cut with a circular saw, you can adjust your depth. If you raise this little black knob up, raise that up, you can see that we can adjust the depth of what we're cutting. Now, the reason that you would want to adjust your depth is so that, let's say that you're cutting a thinner piece of wood, you've got less exposure to your blade below the wood for cutting anything that is below the wood. So let's say that you've got something below the wood that you're cutting. I had this problem whenever I was remodeling my house. I had some floor down that I needed to take up, so I had to cut it, but I didn't want to cut the floor underneath it. So I knew that the thickness of the floor that I was cutting was 3/4 of an inch. I set this to 3/4 of an inch and only cut through the first layer of the floor. Took that layer up and had the floor underneath. And it's still in pretty good shape. This particular saw, most of your saws now have you got to push this down and pull the trigger in order to get them to start. And I'm just going to show you something real quick. Built in right here is a Allen wrench. If you take that Allen wrench out, all right, that Allen wrench, I don't know if you can see this or not, right here, there's a little lock, a little button, and it locks your blade so that you can take your blade off. If you push that button down, I'm pushing it down with my thumb here, stick your blade. These blades are reverse threaded, so most of the time you would do, lefty-loosey, but in this case it's reverse threaded, so you're going to do righty-loosey, which obviously, and you can turn this, take that screw out, take this washer off, and you can take your blade off. Now, if you're going to take your blade off, it's always a good idea, if you're going to be touching the blade, to take the battery out or disconnect it from your wall outlet. This blade obviously has been used a pretty good bit. Putting your blade back on takes just a second. Put the blade back on. All right. Whenever you're putting your blade on, you want the writing facing outwards. So almost all blades have writing on one side, clear on the other side. Put your washer back on. It lines up. It is a slotted washer, and then put this back on. You want to tighten this down hand tight on that nut. Once you tighten that down, you're going to take your Allen wrench again. You got to lock your blade in place. And like I said, instead of doing righty-tighty, we're going to do lefty-tighty until it gets good and snug. That way our blade don't go flying off as we pull the trigger. Almost all your DeWalt saws now come with that Allen wrench built in. You just click it back into place and it stays there. So if you need to change your blade. In order to get your blade depth, I forgot to talk about this part. If you lift that up, this is going to be very hard to see on video. Right here are some numbers. On this little thing right here, there's an arrow, and it will point to the thickness that you want. So if I'm looking at it, there's an arrow. I can put that on 1.5 inches. That would tell me that I'm going to cut an 1.5 inch thick wood. All right. All 2x material is an 1.5 inch thick. Now, most of the time you want to cut slightly. You want your blade to go slightly beyond the wood. So if this is an 1.5 inch thick, I would set this to 2 inches. So I'm going to move my arrow to 2 inches. That way I have about 1/2 inch of blade sticking below the wood, just to make sure I cut all the way through the wood. All right. This is a 7 1/4 inch circular saw. This has a little hanger on it that actually flips in if you look at it. You can flip that out. Let's say that you're working, on a roof and the rafters are there. You can hang this on a rafter and let the rafter hold your saw. Let's say you're up in the air or something. This is a 7 1/4 inch and it's bigger. Cut a little bit bigger boards, easier. This saw is about $130 at the moment. This saw is roughly $170 at the moment. I'm going to make sure the video is still playing. All looks good. All right, we're going to go through batteries. DeWalt battery. This is a 6 amp hour. You can see that it is bigger. This is a 5 amp hour, slightly smaller. All right, and this is a 2 amp hour. Now, just in general, this one's got a little more power and will last you longer. All right, so it's 6 amp hours and 5 amp hours and 2 amp hours. So you've got different battery choices. Depending on what I'm doing, I like to go, if I need something light, I'll throw in the 2 amp hour. Most of the time I roll with a 5 amp hour. It just clicks in. You can unclick it, put your battery in. You can pull the trigger. It's got an electric brake on it, just like we talked about with the miter saw. This one actually stops faster than the miter saw. It stops very fast, so it only spins roughly maybe a second or so after you get done pulling the trigger. We're going to get rolling. PowerPoint safety-wise. Click this off and on. All right. Up here, that is your 6 1/2. That's 7 1/4. That is a corded saw. A corded saw has more power than any of your battery powered stuff. So if you've got a really thick board that you want to cut through, a corded saw is good. The thing about a lot of your corded saws, especially this corded saw, this one's old. If you let off the trigger, the blade is going to keep spinning for a good 20, 30 seconds after you let off the trigger. And the risk of kickback, since these have more power, the risk of kickback is a good bit higher. This is the other saw, like I told you, that we've got 7 1/4. That is the diameter of the blade, 24 teeth. That's how many teeth you got. That dictates the smoothness of your cut. And there is a flex volt one. You can put a 60-volt battery in this. Students wearing the correct personal protective equipment, which would be safety glasses. In this case, especially the blade, you're cutting like this, the blade is spinning like this, so it is throwing sawdust up towards you and towards your eyes. You want to make sure you got safety glasses on, especially if you're cutting OSB. OSB, it splinters off. You're almost guaranteed to get something in your eye cutting with a circular saw on OSB if you don't have glasses on. I've even gotten it in my eyes sometimes with glasses on. It'll come up underneath my glasses here. So just make sure that you got glasses on using the circular saw. Make sure the guard is on the saw in good working condition. Both these saws obviously have guards in good working condition. Upper blade guard, lower blade guard, it tracks back into place. Same deal with this one. Make sure the general area is clear of people. Like I said on the miter saw video, you just don't want somebody bumping into you while you are doing something. So if somebody is, let's say that you're cutting over there on sawbucks, you're cutting a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and people are moving lumber in and out, you may want to quit. May want to wait till they get done moving lumber before you make your cut. Because if somebody's carrying a piece of wood, they look behind them, they bump into you while you're cutting, that's how accidents happen. Clamp the wood to the table correctly, support it, and make sure that it will not pinch the blade. All right, so one of the things now, if you've got a short piece like this, just put it on your table. These are called quick clamps, all right? The smaller piece here, that is for large adjustment. The trigger for smaller adjustment. So once you do this, you can use the large adjustment to get it close, and then use your micro adjustment and tighten it up. That will hold your wood in place. Now let's say that you're using sawbucks and you've got a longer piece of wood and you don't have a clamp near. If we can pretend just for a second that this table is a sawbuck and this table is a sawbuck, right? It's supported. However, this is not, you should never do this. The reason being is if I go to cut through this, I always tell my students, never cut between sawbucks. If you cut between sawbucks, what's going to happen, we're going to watch another video on this. You're going to cut, and as you get towards the end, this is going to start falling. The top part of the wood is going to pinch the blade. It's going to catch it. The blade can't go forward anymore because the wood is pinching it. So all of that energy from the saw has to go somewhere, and more than likely it's going to shoot your saw back towards you. So never cut between sawbucks. So what do? You let your wood hang off one side. You cut, and as you get towards the end, you just let it fall on the floor. Make sure, obviously, you move your feet. But do not cut between sawbucks or support it on both sides. You want to hold one side down here, cut here. All right? Making sure the video is still working. It says it's recording. Good deal. Next part. All right, you want your saw to be a ½ inch below the wood. This minimizes your exposure to the blade. Now, if it's something that you don't want to cut all the way through, you can potentially even have your saw less. But if I put my saw all the way down, I do not want a whole bunch of blades sticking out below the wood. That you're just asking for something to happen or get cut. So you want to set your blade to the correct angle. The correct angle is typically just going to be straight up and down, which is 0. Make sure that nothing is below the wood that the blade can cut into, such as the sawhorse or cord. I have seen several guys in my life cut through the cord on the saw. So let's say that this saw had a cord. The cord is dangling and it is run under the sawbucks and it's run under here. If there's a bunch of blade under there and this saw is plugged up to a drop cord, there's several guys have cut through their own cord on the saw while it's plugged in the drop cord, and sparks fly because you're obviously cutting the live wire. I've had a student, I got a set of metal sawbucks over there. I had a student that took the sawbuck, he took the saw, he didn't look under his wood, it was a sheet material. He's cutting through the sheet material and the sawbuck is underneath it, and he runs into the metal sawbuck with my blade, and it bends about 3 of the teeth on the blade. So I had to take the blade off, trash it, and get a new one. Make sure to draw or chalk a line to follow. So we've got our wood clamped in place. All right, we're going to measure over, and I'm just going to make up a measurement, tape measure. We're just going to call it, let's say 3 3/8. If we put a mark at 3 3/8, take your speed square. Your speed square has a little lip here. You hook that lip. Now I can't do this where my clamp is at, so I got to move it. You hook that lip on the edge. You slide the edge of it up to, and all you're doing with that speed square is making a straight line. You got to have a straight line to follow so that you can cut straight. If you try to eyeball cutting straight, you're obviously going, it's going to be crooked. Now, if you're really good like Larry Hahn, you can do that. You'll find out more about Larry Hahn later. All right. Another thing you can do with your speed square is you can make angles. All right. This corner right here is your pivot point, and you can pivot that to, let's say, 30 degrees, and then I could draw and make an angle that way if I needed to. All right. So that's a speed square. Do not call it a triangle. And square, the reason we call it square is this makes a 90-degree angle, and anytime something makes a 90-degree angle, we call that square. Now, I measured from this side going that way, and I want to keep this piece, so I'm going to put an X on this side of my line. If I put an X on this side, that tells me it's the waist side. I want all of my blade to be over here whenever I'm cutting. All right? Make sure to stand to the side of the saw when cutting to avoid if kickback happens. So one of the best things, all right, let's say that you're going to get a kickback. If my saw is here, my body in relation to the saw is over here to the side. That way, if it does happen to kick back, it misses me. All right. So if you stand directly behind the saw and the saw kicks back, it hits you. So you just want to make sure you stand off to the side. That way, if something does happen, you're using the proper safety technique to keep you from getting hurt if possible. I don't know if you can see this or not. Hopefully Use both hands to guide the saw, all right, especially with corded saw. Most of the time with battery operated saws, I will operate those with one hand. If I have a corded circular saw, now I don't do that so much for guidance as, as cutting straight. But if I got the corded one's got more power. I do that in case that way I've got more power to hold the saw in place if it tries to kick back on me. All right. So especially with corded ones, do not try to force the saw back onto the cutting line if the saw gets off the drawn line. I don't know if you can see this in the video, but here's this guy's line. His saw mark is off the line. The natural tendency for some people is as they're cutting, they get off the line, they try to curve back to the line. Well, you're cutting with a straight blade and you can't cut a curve with a straight blade. What that does is it pinches the front, it pinches the back of the blade, and the blade has nowhere to go, so all of that energy yet again is going to go probably into a kickback. The best thing to do if you get off of your line, all right, is to back up in your cut, get on the line, and just restart. Okay? Do not try to force it back over onto the line. All right? It'll pinch and you'll get a kickback. The saw blade must be turning before making contact with the wood, just like with the miter saw. We'll go ahead and make a cut. It's getting pretty close. I'm going to cut on this side of my line. I'm going to start with my blade about 1/4 of an inch off the wood. All right. I'm going to get the blade turning, go into the wood, make my cut. I'm going to stay right beside of my line the whole time. Not on the line, but right beside of the line the whole time. All right. And if I pick this up, I can barely see just a little bit of my pencil mark where I made my pencil mark. I don't know if you can see this on the video.